and welcome to Planty Planty Zoo Zoo. I'm Connor.
I'm Stephanie.
And we are the curators of an imaginary zoo called Planty Planty Zoo Zoo. I handle all of the animal side.
I do the plants.
Each week we will each be adding a different species to our respective collections. So, without further ado, would you like to go first, Steph?
What very nice of you.
To the botanical side of Planty Planty Zoo Zoo today?
Well, last week you demanded that you go first, so I'm frankly shocked that you are letting me go first.
Fair's fair.
So I've gone down a different route this week. So last week was a tree species and it was my favourite tree species, and so that was kind of a nice way to start this off. But I thought this time I'd tell you a bit of a story, because everyone likes a good story, so something a little bit different. So we are going to start with the pass-it-on plant. Have you heard of the pass-it-on plant?
I haven't, no.
Okay, wow, what a surprise.
That's rude.
So I'm going to say it wrong, but it's the scientific name, Pilea peperodiomes. You know, I could have watched a YouTube video and it could have told me how to pronounce that. It's a very popular houseplant. I'm sure it would have been easy, but I didn't do that, and here we are. So, Pilea peperodiomes.
Literally any actual botanist we had listening to this podcast have all just left.
They've switched that off.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm
Apologies
so sorry.
to you. We hope you come back at some point.
You know what? You're not wanted. So as well as being called the pass-it-on plant, and we'll get on to why it's called that later if I remember, it's also called the UFO plant. That's
a cooler name, I'll be honest with you.
It is. So, native to a very specific area of southern China. So I've got a photo up to show you. These are its leaves.
Oh, no, I recognise that.
Yeah.
Very common houseplant.
It is.
Yeah.
So it's only been common. So it's got these sort of very circular leaves. It's also known as the Chinese money plant.
I was about to say, is it a money plant?
Yeah. As well as the picture of the leaves there, I've also got, just show you how it grows as a little houseplant.
Oh.
So we'll be sharing these on social media. So check out our Instagram at Planty Planty Zoo Zoo, where we'll share the photos that I'm showing Connor. So they've only become very common in sort of recent years. So we're used to seeing them all over sort of Pinterest, Instagram, just sort of idealistic housing, photo shooty things. But it wasn't always that way. So now I'm going to tell you this really cool story about how this plant became established in the UK, essentially. Because I guess we always think the way we get our houseplants is they are identified somewhere in the wild hundreds of years ago, and then they exist in some botanical collection, and then someone at some point, starts growing it, and then they start selling it, and then it spreads. And for a lot of plants, that is what happens, but that's not the case with this one. So I thought I'd sort of disclose that I got a lot of this information from the book called Rootbound by Alice Vincent, which is the one you got me for my birthday, which I'm still reading. But she did a really good job of talking through the sort of story of it. So I recommend you read that book. So, 1970s UK.
Was that when you were born?
1960s. Close though. 1970s UK. So, glam rock is a thing, probably. I don't really know what else happened in the 70s. Flares?
I think it's very clear you don't know what happened in the 70s.
Flares, glam rock, and...
Was it ABBA 70s?
No internet. Imagine you're there with no internet, your flares on, listening to some rock music with lots of keyboard, setting the scene. Imagine you are a curator at a botanical gardens. You're doing your lovely day's work in your herbarium, and you open the post, you've got some nice packages arrive, and one of them you pull out a little cutting of this very weird looking sort of UFO shaped plant, and you look at it and you're like, I have no idea what that is, and I should know. I'm just going to write back and be like, you know what, your sample is rubbish, so I can't ID it, or you're going to check with your friends or whatever it is you do. But essentially that's what was happening in the 1970s. Gardeners and people that like houseplants all over the UK, they were sending off these little cuttings of these plants to botanic gardens to be like, I have this plant, I love it. What is it? I don't know what it is, I just know I like it. And botanists were replying saying, we don't know, we have no idea what it is. So these are Kew, Edinburgh, Wisley botanical gardens were all saying we have no idea what this is. The fact that it was so widespread though meant that gardeners were sort of exchanging and gifting clippings to each other, and that's how it was spreading. So that's why it's known as a pass it on plant or the friendship plant.
Oh, because people like giving it to each other as like a nice little gift, just being like, I don't know what this is. There you go.
Yeah, or like they're really easy to propagate. So
Yeah.
they'll just start growing their own mini versions of themselves in the same soil, and you can just uproot them and put it in a new pot, and it just starts growing. Yeah, so it was known as like the friendship plant for that reason, or the pass it on plant for the same reason. They were sort of trying to track it down for a while, and then finally in 1978, someone called Wessel Marais at Kew traced it to a Chinese plant. So the way that they traced it is that in Edinburgh Botanical Gardens, the plant hunter George Forrest had actually collected it in the early 1900s and stored it at Edinburgh Botanical Gardens. So they managed to trace it to that specimen. Botanists then wanted to try and figure out how this plant was locked away in the UK when it was native to China, and how had it become so widespread. So this plant had essentially jumped from China to the UK in the 1900s, and no one really knew how or why. So then they started doing some detective work to try and find the history of it, which I think sounds like a really cool job if you're just sort of a detective.
Oh, honestly, plant detective.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
So that's what they were doing. So the first thing in the UK was public pleas were put into newspapers in the 1980s, just saying, like, sharing a photo of it and sort of saying, do you have one of these?
Have you seen this plant?
Yeah, literally. Have you seen it? If you have, can you write to us and tell us where you got it from? So in response to these pleas, they got like thousands of letters back from people, which then had to get all sifted through. And that led plant detectives to the Sidebottoms, which is a family of people in Cornwall.
The Sidebottoms.
The Sidebottoms, yeah.
Amazing.
Solid
of course
surname.
it led them to the Sidebottoms in Cornwall.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. What they found was in the 1960s, the daughter of that family in Cornwall had an au pair who was Swedish. And this girl was pretty lucky because the au pair decided to take her on holiday to Norway. So this 9-year-old girl and this au pair off to Norway in the 60s.
Oh my God.
Can you imagine what a sick holiday that would have been? What an amazing trip to have had. So they did, and when they were there, the au pair gave this girl a specimen of this plant, and she brought it back to the UK.
Wait, from Norway?
Yeah.
So still not China?
Still not China. So we are only on stage 1 of solving this mystery. But because they had that information, they basically took the search to Scandinavia. Of like, okay, how has it gone from China to Scandinavia to the UK?
So now we're globe-trotting plant detectives.
We are globe-trotting plant detectives. We are still in our flares. We have also time travelled to the 1960s.
Our ankles are very cold. We're in Scandinavia in flares. It's a bad time.
It's a bad time. So the interesting thing here, when they took the search to Scandinavia, was that Scandinavian botanists hadn't seen it. They didn't know what it was. So when botanists from Scandinavia were coming over to the UK, to the botanical gardens, they were being shown specimens and being like, do you know what this is? Is it in your records? And they were like, nope, got no idea what this is. So that sort of added to the mystery. So then, kind of an interesting thing, that all these sort of botanists were being told, please figure it out. Please go to your countries respectively, find out about plants. People were just well into finding out the story behind it. And one person, Lars, I haven't got his surname down, don't know what it is, but he took it dead seriously. He got on TV, or got the message on TV in Sweden, showing the plant and being like, do you have this plant? If you have this plant, please write to us. We are trying to find out the history of this plant. So that's what they did, and they ended up guess how many letters they ended up getting.
So where did it go on TV?
In Sweden.
TV in Sweden?
Yeah.
So just, not like global TV,
No.
just Sweden?
Just Sweden.
Like, how many people are in Sweden? Like 10,000?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, no, you're right.
Oh, damn!
Oh, damn.
My geographic knowledge of the population of Sweden comes in really handy.
Yeah, that was on point. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Right, well, 10,000 is the number that they got. So then obviously they had to read them, read all the letters, filter through them all. So that must have been really annoying. But essentially, by going through it all, it took them to a new part of the story. So, in 1944, a man called Agna Espegren was working as a missionary in China, and he had to flee. He had to leave. Online it's a bit vague on the details, but I think it's because Japan was invading the area that he was in, and he was trying to get back home. He went via another area in China, stayed there for about a week, and that's when he picked up a specimen of the pass it on plant. So he probably got it from somewhere like a market.
Yeah.
Where they were probably trading it there. And then he went to India and he kept the specimen with him. And it was like growing on his windowsill for a couple of years in India. And then in 1946, he came back to Norway and he had it with him. He still had it. He kept it all that time.
Well, this one individual plant went from China to India all the way up to Norway.
Yeah. Yeah. And Agnar was a generous guy. So he was, when these plants were putting out their tiny babies, he was replanting them. He was giving them out to friends, whoever wanted them, passing them around all of Norway. And that's basically how it ended up there.
Wait. So he's the source of it all?
He's the source of it.
So this one guy is the reason everybody these days has a money plant on their windowsill?
In the 1970s, for sure. Now, I mean, it's quite easier to buy them. But up until the mid-1970s, all of the plants in the UK, of this species, were descended from that one plant.
Wow.
They were like clones of it. So all thanks to Agna bringing it back to Norway, and all thanks to a 9-year-old girl from Cornwall who got the plant into the UK. But now you can get them at like IKEA and things like that. But they're really popular online, like I said, in the sort of 2019 and before. So that recently, sort of 2019, people were paying like 40 quid for like a few centimetres growing of this plant in the hopes that they could make it survive. Yeah, that's the story of how we ended up with it. So I just wanted to tell that story as a bit of like this is how much people will care about plants. And also this is how interesting their background can be. There's always these really interesting tales of getting the plants into different countries, and also just the lengths people go to, and just tracking their history is just so interesting.
Because forgive me, when you mentioned that, I was like, I mean, we want to run a really cool botanical gardens. It's a potted plant that you can get. It's
a common house plant.
Why do we want that in the botanic garden? Actually,
allow me.
That story is amazing already. Just the kind of the background of that going. Actually, the thing that's really, really common you can find absolutely everywhere now. Once it only came from one plant that was brought back by a Norwegian man from China on his kind of journey.
Yeah. So this is the thing. There was a couple of. So there's actually a few reasons why I want it. So, for people when you've seen the plant online, seen a picture of it, and you're thinking, oh yeah, that plant, I see it everywhere. It's like just a common house plant. There's a few really interesting things to do with it. So one is that story. So in our zoo, coming onto Planty Planty Zoo Zoo, I want a sort of enclosure-y type situation. Enclosure's the wrong word for plants. I want an area which is like common popular houseplants and interesting sort of background interpretation. So my thought is we have a nice house built. Maybe I can live there. Maybe I'll go on the upper story. But a nice house built, and just have these plants positioned in different places in like their ideal scenario, so people can also learn about plant care when they come to our botanical garden zoo. And then we can have interpretation in the form of like actors, videos. We could have the like the luggage of this, like pretend luggage of this guy, and like the plant in it. It's going to be a good scene. I like
that a lot.
Yeah. So we're going to do that. The other thing is, although this plant is super, super common in homes, it's actually endangered in the wild.
What?
Yeah, it's endangered in the wild.
One question.
Yeah.
How?
Well, in the wild, it only grows in the southwest of Sichuan province and in the west of Yunnan province in China. So I think if I remember correctly, the Agna, that guy, he was in the Yunnan province. So it's just these two isolated regions. This plant only grows to about 30 centimetres tall. It grows on shady, damp rocks in mountain forests. So it's got quite a specific niche. It needs to be in shady, damp rocks in mountain forests. And these forests are under a threat, as you can probably imagine, just like most forests and ecosystems around the world, due to humans cutting them down, due to climate change, things like that. It's just causing all these issues. So they are classified as endangered in the wild, but it is very unlikely that we're going to lose them as a species on Earth because so many people have them in their houses. But this goes back to conservation. The most important part of conservation isn't about taking plants and animals out of their natural habitat necessarily and preserving them in that way. The most important thing we can do for conservation is preserve the natural habitats so that they have a home to grow in. So it's the same with these plants as well. What we want to do is protect those forests in the mountains of China. So the other way I wanted to use them, why I chose them for Planty Planty Zoo Zoo, is they're really good in reptile and amphibian enclosures.
Ooh. So
we can also use them there. I assume you'll have reptiles and amphibians at some point. At the moment, we've just got hummingbirds. But so they've got uses, they've got good story, good interpretation, and they were a joy to research, to be honest.
Right, they sound absolutely delightful. That couple of questions. I mean, I don't know anything about plants, but if they only like that kind of damp soil or whatever in the rainforest or in the bottom of a mountain,
In the mountains.
What you said.
In the mountains on rocks,
yeah. There you go, that one. The rock, if they only like the damp rocks in the mountains, why do they grow so well on somebody's windowsill in the UK?
So the way that they're pretty happy in the UK is actually in terrariums. So they need a lot of moisture, so lots and lots of spritzing, but they actually need fairly dry soil.
Okay.
And then they need the light that comes through the glass. So they're good windowsill plants because they get a lot of heat and light coming that way. And so long as you spray them a bunch and don't overwater them, they'll be pretty happy. That's why they're good with amphibians and reptiles, because they obviously have, glass enclosures and the plants love that. But this is why people struggle to grow them at first when not much was known about them. Because that's the thing, in the 70s when people were growing them, they didn't know where they were from, how they grew, they didn't know what genus they were in. Gardeners were just trial and error, figuring it out.
Nice.
So yeah.
And if you say they're declining out in the wild, they're endangered, would we, if it got to the point where those habitats was kind of stable, would we be able to just take one from someone's windowsill in the UK and pop it back out in the wild? Would that would kind of transplants like that work?
This is where my lack of knowledge on reintroduction of plants into the wild is really going to show, but I don't know. I mean, you'd like to think so, wouldn't you? If you stabilised an environment, maybe even increased the size of the area, you'd like to think it. But I mean, from when we were working at Bristol Zoo and we used to give talks on, or you still do at Wild Place, on the lemurs, and we talk about that project to plant trees, to grow the forests out in the wild. But then there was like one organisation that planted 10,000 trees or 100,000 trees, and they all died because they weren't in optimal conditions. So I don't know if it's like because it's native to that area it would just be absolutely fine, or if I don't know if having a plant sort of in your home would change it over time. But I mean, you'd like to think you could just plonk it out there. I like to think that. So we could have a plant reintroduction program.
Nice.
So that's it really from me.
Fab. Well, that was wonderful. That sounds like a lovely little plan. Right, thank you for that. Thank you for that plant this week. That sounds absolutely amazing. For my species this week, I'm not going to make it that easy. I'm going to make you guess again.
Okay.
And you may notice I've given you some big paper and some felt tip pens, because what I want you to do...
I literally didn't notice.
to help guess, I'm going to give you a description of this animal and I want you to draw it. Because
this is a podcast, right?
No, I know. We can pop it on socials afterwards. Because I think it's going to be an absolute car crash.
Wow, okay.
Am I wrong?
Wait, are you insulting me? I thought you were insulting your own description skills, because you should.
Oh, no, I'm completely insulting your drawing.
Oh, yeah, no, it might be bad.
So we're going to start. It's got a fairly massive but short torso on four legs. So don't do the legs yet, but we're going to go torso. The back legs are significantly shorter than the front legs, so the back slopes downwards. Mm-hmm. The legs are relatively thin and weak, but the neck is thick and long.
Are you describing yourself?
Oh, I deserve that.
Yeah.
The head is really heavy with a short, stubby face.
Heavy with a short, stubby face.
Small eyes.
Small eyes, okay.
With sharply pointed, very large ears set high on its head.
Right.
It's got a short tail. It's got a really long mane of hairs from the back of its head all the way to the base of its tail. Really thick, kind of long mane.
Yep.
It's got a dirty brown coat.
Yep.
Its ears are almost black.
Uh-huh.
The front legs are covered with small dark spots and longer stripes.
Front legs are covered with small dark spots and longer stripes. What direction are the stripes in? Horizontal? Vertical?
Horizontal, I think.
Mm-hmm.
The back legs have got 4 dark vertical stripes and rows of spots.
Oh.
And the tip of its tail is black. Okay, first of all, show me what you've drawn, and then second of all, tell me what you think it is.
Okay, I would like to make a complaint. You haven't mentioned its mouth or nose, other than short stubby face.
There's a nose on the end of its short stubby face, and it's got a mouth.
What does the mouth look like, Connor?
Looks like a mouth. Are you ready to reveal? I really, really annoyingly, that's actually pretty bloody good.
I'm going to name him Connor.
Any idea what you've drawn?
Amara?
No.
A Carpi?
No.
Gelada? No, they've not got pointy ears. Wolf thing?
That's the closest you've got so far. Shall I show you?
No, wolf thing. Is it like similar to a hyena? Is it a hyena?
God, I hate this.
It's a hyena!
I hate this game!
I got it again! 2 out of 2! 100% success rate. Yes!
That's a striped hyena.
Oh my god, I am good. Yeah, that looks exactly the same.
That's actually quite annoyingly good.
To be honest, you're bigging it up. People are going to be very disappointed if they look at this drawing. You need to say that, but also be like, but it looks like it's drawn by a 4-year-old.
It's better than I expected from you.
Yep.
So yeah, the animal I'll be adding to Planty Planty Zoo Zoo today is a striped hyena.
Perfect.
So not the one you
choice.
probably think of when I say hyena.
No.
You're probably thinking of the spotted hyena, kind of
Lion
more famous
King
one, the Lion
Yeah.
King one. Absolutely. That's another species of hyenas. Well, actually once 100 species. There's now only 4.
Oh.
Spotted, striped, brown hyena, and then the aardwolf.
Aardwolf, is that not a wolf?
No.
Oh.
It's a kind of hyena. It's more closely related to those guys. And so yeah, I love a striped hyena. So I want to add them to Planty Planty Zoo Zoo.
Nice.
So they're, I mean, you're going to say this and you're immediately going to go, that sounds like a bad zoo animal, because it's primarily nocturnal.
Sounds like a bad zoo animal.
So it only actually really leaves a den in total darkness, out in the wild at least.
1 second. Shall we have a 24-hour zoo?
Yes.
Okay.
There we go.
We need
Solution.
Yeah.
But they're also monogamous. So whereas you see spotted hyenas in these huge groups of up to like 80,
Yeah.
striped hyenas will hang out with their partner and some of their kids at a maximum like 6 in a group.
Oh.
So they're not quite as social, but they do form dens together, and both the parents help with the feeding and the raising the young. And they'll, by dens I mean literal actual dens underground, a little bit kind of like a meerkat but bigger. And so they'll dig their own, but they'll actually also kind of take over burrows from things like aardvarks and warthogs, porcupines as well. But you can usually tell when there's a hyena using it, because the outside will be surrounded with bones, which
That's
is just
so
really
alarming.
gnarly.
I love
it.
What do they eat in the zoo?
Out in the zoo, they basically take any meat they can get. So
So they
kind of
still decorate their den with whatever bones you give it?
I'd imagine so. Yeah, it'd be pretty cool. You probably have to take them away in the zoo, I guess. I don't know.
Oh.
And while they eat basically whatever they want, whatever they can find. So big things like carrion, already kind of rotting, decomposing meat. They will hunt occasionally as well. So things like porcupines, tortoises, even insects. And then across their range as well, if they come into kind of human habitations, they'll take rubbish. And they are also known for kind of disrupting crop plantations, so things like melon plantations as well. They'll come in for the fruit as well. So they've got a pretty kind of big range of diets. And that range is pretty big. It's the most widely distributed of the hyena species, or at least it probably was. Not very much is known about its current range at the moment, because basically there's no one studying these, or not a lot of people studying them at all. So it's pretty much unknown how many there are in most of their kind of range habitats. But historically, at least, covered most of northern and eastern Africa, and on the eastern side went down south to about kind of Tanzania, so kind of, you know, a big portion down the side of the continent there. It's also stretched over into the Arabian Peninsula, the Middle East, Turkey, Iraq, Azerbaijan, places like that, all the way through Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, and into the Indian subcontinent as well. So Nepal, Bhutan, and there's probably a fairly big population, we think, still there in India. Again, those populations, we don't know how kind of joined up they are. They're probably pretty isolated populations, some with only kind of less than 50 individuals. Some, like India, probably have maybe up to 3,000, but again, we just don't really know. But all in all, the IUCN suggests there's less than 10,000 left in the world. So they're what we call near threatened. So they're not a massive conservation concern at the moment, but it looks like they're probably heading that way. And if we had a bit more data on them, they might be.
So we're getting ahead of the game a little bit at Planty Planty Zoo Zoo.
Yeah, exactly.
Just in case.
Potentially, yeah. And they are kind of a bit more focused of conservation recently as well, because people are kind of realising that we don't know much about them, and maybe we should research them a bit more and kind of work out exactly where they are and how we can protect them. But it's interesting, we've done that thing we did last week as well, of accidentally kind of aligning our species.
Ooh.
Because your plant was all about storytelling, and actually striped hyenas have a really big place in the kind of stories of different cultures. So they're kind of spread throughout folklore in kind of most of the countries that you'll find them in. So things like Arabian folklore suggests they're actually vampiric, and they attack people to suck their blood.
Oh, good boys.
They can also mesmerise people with their eyes, apparently, and their pheromones.
Oh.
The Greeks believed that if you didn't destroy a werewolf's body after you killed it, it would come back as a hyena to drink the blood of soldiers left behind on battlefields.
Oh, man.
Which isn't completely unfounded. There have been reports of striped hyenas actually scavenging on human corpses, but that was kind of back in some of the world wars where corpses weren't buried properly, so they were just kind of lying around. So I don't think the hyenas can be
also,
really...
it's not unreasonable if an animal sees meat, then...
Exactly, it's not like they're not really going up and digging up bodies from graveyards or anything.
But even if they did, I mean,
yeah.
they're not being immoral.
No,
They're a
exactly.
hyena.
Exactly, but it's a bit of a kind of bad reputation they've got that isn't necessarily earned.
Ugh.
But they're also connected to love through a lot of that folklore as well. So the Greeks and the Romans believed the genitalia of a hyena could hold a couple peaceably together.
Oh, wait. The genitalia of a hyena?
Yeah, absolutely.
What were they doing with it?
What
do you mean?
Unclear. They just the possession of a hyena's genitals would mean a couple would stay together.
Do you think they'd hang it from their wall?
Potentially.
That's
not even the worst. They also thought wearing a hyena anus as an amulet up on your upper arm made the male possessor irresistible to women. And
I'm going to get you in for Valentine's Day.
That goes over to West and South Asia as well, where hyena body parts apparently play an important role in love magic and the making of amulets. In Iranian folklore, a stone found in the hyena's body serves as a charm of protection for whoever wears it. And in Afghanistan and Pakistan, striped hyena hair is also used in love magic or as a charm for sickness to help people kind of heal. So lots of kind of folklore bits, but also kind of lots of traditional medicine, superstitious beliefs around hyenas and their body parts.
Do they get killed a lot for their body parts?
Absolutely. Oh. So that is the kind of negative side of all that storytelling, is that actually, as is the case with most animals that play a role in folklore, there's actually not any evidence to back up any of the claims that are made about their various body parts, but that doesn't stop them being killed for those body parts, and so they've seen a big reduction in numbers because people have been trying to
get their anuses.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know the
So that is one of the really bad things about them having kind of such a common position in folklore. And so going back to how we tell those stories at Planty Planty Zoo Zoo, I think a really interesting focus of our striped hyena enclosure could be the theming we do and how we can make that fit with how these hyenas are represented in different cultures and their stories, and make sure that we kind of rebuild the reputation of hyenas, because not just striped hyenas, all hyenas are kind of seen as pretty nasty animals or pretty immoral animals maybe, and so they've all seen reductions in population because of that. So actually being able to kind of dispel some of the myths and say that actually hyenas don't go around digging up relatives on purpose to eat them. They don't go sucking the blood of people and their kind of body parts.
They're not doing it to fuck with you. They're just they're just being hyenas.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so that could be some really cool interpretation for around the enclosure as well. Another big thing, another big threat is that while they're mainly scavengers, so they will kind of eat lots of carrion and kind of things that are already dead, they do often raid livestock, especially smaller things, and crops as well, as we mentioned earlier. So things like watermelon, dates, small livestock. And so actually they've not got a very good reputation with, local farmers or small holdings, and so will often be killed in retaliation, mainly via poisoning usually, which I imagine isn't a fantastic way to go for a striped hyena. So a lot of conservation work, again, is kind of focused on human-wildlife interactions and how we can improve those and make sure that local people can live in harmony with these animals as well. And so one organisation that is really good at that is Wildlife SOS, and they're an Indian wildlife rescue rehabilitation organisation. But they also do lots of research and lots of kind of education with populations over there as well to make sure there are some solutions for how local people can live in harmony with the wildlife.
Nice.
And I saw a really good example that at the end of last year, so quite a recent example, in a village in India called Azizpur, villagers saw a striped hyena. Having heard the reputation of hyenas, they chased it away and it got stuck in a pipe, a big culvert. And so Wildlife SOS came and they rescued it. And they kind of rehabilitated it and then re-released it and make sure it was went on its way.
Nice.
And so they're a fantastic organisation that runs actually 12 rescue and rehabilitation centres all across India. So for things like elephants, bears, hyenas as well. And so I just thought that was a really nice little kind of organisation to shout out as well.
We'll put links to it and stuff in
absolutely.
in our things. That's great. Did you ever watch that documentary about the wildlife documentary? And I think it mainly focused on animals at night, and they had hyenas for one of them. Have you seen that?
Maybe.
And it was like a village, I can't remember where, but they actually had a really positive relationship with the hyenas. They would leave food out for them and stuff.
Oh really?
Yeah, meat out, and there was a guy on the show, he was sitting on a step, kind of being hey boy, and they had a really close relationship, but I can't remember what that was on, but yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, and they're actually really good for their ecosystems as well, because striped hyenas, with them eating loads of all the kind of dead stuff that happens out there, it means that they actually reduce the spread of diseases, because if they eat those dead things and they've got these horrible diseases, hyenas are actually immune to a lot of horrible diseases. So things like anthrax, striped hyenas pretty much immune to.
Oh, nice.
And so it means that if all the kind of anthrax infested carcasses are eaten by these hyenas that don't show any symptoms from them, it's not being passed on to other things, and they kind of clear all the dead waste away before it starts rotting and starts passing on these kind of horrible diseases. So they're really good for their ecosystems as well, and avoiding these big kind of pandemics.
What's a pandemic?
But yeah, and so I think they're quite a really cool animal, and they're a little bit less basic than a normal hyena, because I love spotted hyenas, but these ones are a little bit more. They're kind of like a spotted hyena's slightly edgier cousin.
Nice. They do look very cool.
They look absolutely amazing, and they're again fairly rare, especially here in the UK. So Europe, there's a few, but there's not a single one in a public collection in the UK. We have had them in zoos up until fairly recently, up until about 2018. I've actually seen one, which I didn't remember until I was researching this, because I thought I saw a normal hyena, but actually I saw a striped hyena back at Twycross Zoo when I was a youngster. And I loved it. It was absolutely fantastic.
Nice.
They're relatively easy to make an enclosure for, pretty much, because they like kind of shrubby, sandy, kind of grasslandy habitats. You can make a fairly good looking enclosure fairly easy, plant it up with loads of grasses, loads of kind of long dry grasses, nice sand pits and things like that. There's a couple of good examples that I thought of, the Fort Worth Zoo and the Living Desert Zoo over in the US. They looked like they had really good hyena enclosures. That's one at the Living Desert Zoo. It looks nice and fab.
Big window, kind of like the hummingbird enclosure from last week, but for hyenas.
Yeah, it's John Lewis for hyenas this time.
John Lewis for hyenas. We'll put them in together, save on costs.
This is why I'm glad this is a hypothetical concept.
I'm in charge of the plants, otherwise it'll be fine. So far we've got one house plant and one tree, which can grow anywhere. Low maintenance.
But I thought what would be a really cool idea, because I've never seen this done, there might be a reason I've never seen it done, is because they're a nocturnal animal, you might not see them out and about as much. Their routines would probably change being in a zoo with feeding time and stuff, so they'd probably become a little bit more active. But also, I'd love the idea of having like a kind of lowered into the ground den that you can actually access via a one-way glass window, so you can see it and they can't see out, so they can just go about their normal time, having a sleep, moving around in their den or whatever. And you can actually, whilst seeing the hyenas at ground level, you can also take a little ramp down and see them in their den under the ground as well.
Oh my god, that'd be amazing.
Now, I mean, I can hear any zookeeper listening to this going, how are you going to clean that?
Ignore them.
So feasibly, probably a bad idea, but from a visitor perspective, it looked absolutely amazing.
We need a barrier by the den bit so visitors don't go up and like just bang on the glass.
Yes. So yeah, that was striped hyena.
Well, that was fantastic. And now we've got 2 extra species in our zoo. It's all coming together nicely.
Only a few hundred more to go.
Yep. We'll be continuing this podcast till we die. Till one of us is finally rich enough to build it in real life. So that's the end of the podcast this week. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to stay up to date with everything Planty Planty Zoo Zoo does, you can sign up to our newsletter on our website, plantyplantzyzoo.com. And we also post all our episodes there with links to all the different platforms that you can listen to them on.
You can also find us on a couple of different social media. So if you'd like to find us on Twitter, we're at Planty Planty Zoo. And if you want to find us on Instagram, we're at Planty Planty Zoo Zoo.
Yeah, we might crop up on others at some time. We haven't yet decided. So, and it would be really, really helpful if you could sort of rate, review, subscribe, share, whatever it is you can do on the platform you're listening on, our podcast. Just like the Pass It On plant, you can pass on this podcast to your friends. Connor literally told me I had to say that joke.
It was much better when I delivered it, so I can't believe I gave that to you.
So yes, we'll see you next week. So we've got new episodes every Thursday. See you next Thursday. Bye!
Bye!